You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. The 21st Century Cures Act marked a major turning point in U.S. health policy by embedding interoperability and information access at the heart of modern healthcare. Its vision was straightforward but transformative. Patients, providers, and innovators should have frictionless access to electronic health information so that data can follow the patient wherever care occurs. The law responded to long-standing frustrations that information was trapped in silos, making it difficult for patients to engage with their own health data and for providers to deliver coordinated care. By prohibiting artificial barriers to exchange, the Cures Act sought to empower individuals, promote innovation, and reduce inefficiencies across the health system. For learners, this act demonstrates how law is used to force technological and cultural change, turning data liquidity from an aspiration into an enforceable expectation. At the center of the Cures Act is the prohibition on information blocking. This default rule holds that no actor may unreasonably interfere with the access, exchange, or use of electronic health information, unless a recognized exception applies. Information blocking can occur when a hospital delays releasing test results to patients, when a vendor restricts interfaces to force proprietary systems, or when networks impose excessive fees for connections. For learners, the prohibition illustrates a legal reversal of the status quo. Historically, entities could restrict data sharing with little consequence. Now the law presumes data must flow unless specific documented reasons justify restrictions. This presumption shifts the burden toward openness and requires organizations to actively defend any barriers they maintain. The Act defines three categories of actors subject to information blocking rules: healthcare providers, health information networks or exchanges, and developers of certified health information technology. Each category carries tailored expectations, but shares the same overarching duty to avoid unreasonable interference. Providers must ensure patients can access their records, networks must facilitate exchanges across participants, and developers must avoid contractual or technical designs that prevent interoperability. For learners, these categories reflect the diverse ecosystem of health information exchange. Enforcement applies not only to frontline providers, but also to the behind-the-scenes infrastructure that shapes how data moves. It emphasizes that accountability must reach every actor capable of influencing data flow. Electronic health information, or EHI, is the substance of the Act's protections. Its scope has been phased in gradually, beginning with a limited set of data elements and expanding toward the full designated record set defined under HIPAA. This expansion ensures that patients gain access to a broader array of information over time, including not just clinical notes but also billing, claims, and other records used to make decisions about individuals. For learners, the evolving scope of EHI demonstrates the Act's balance between ambition and practicality. By phasing implementation, regulators provided time for organizations to adapt while ensuring that the end goal, comprehensive access, remains in sight. A major enabler of interoperability is the requirement for standardized application programming interfaces, or APIs. These APIs allow patients to connect their chosen apps to health records, similar to how banking APIs let consumers link accounts to financial tools. Standardized APIs remove the need for custom integrations, opening access to a wide range of innovators. For learners, the significance lies in consumer empowerment. APIs make it possible for patients to use personal health applications, consolidate records from multiple providers, or share information seamlessly with new care teams. The mandate democratizes access, reducing dependence on proprietary portals and encouraging a vibrant ecosystem of patient-directed tools. Central to this ecosystem is the United States Core Data for Interoperability, or USCDI. This dataset defines the minimum elements that must be shared across systems, such as allergies, medications, problems, and vital signs. By establishing a baseline, USCDI ensures that all actors have a common language for exchange. For learners, this standard highlights how interoperability is built on consensus and uniformity. Without a shared dataset, exchanges risk becoming inconsistent or incomplete. USCDI provides the foundation for reliable information sharing, giving patients confidence that essential data will always be available across systems. Privacy and security by design are embedded into the API framework. The Cures Act anticipates that data will flow beyond traditional HIPAA-covered entities, making it critical to integrate safeguards into the design of APIs and apps. This includes secure authentication, encryption, and consent mechanisms that prevent misuse. For learners, this requirement shows how interoperability cannot be divorced from security. Open systems are only valuable if they maintain trust, and trust requires that data is protected as it flows. The Act thus aligns interoperability with long-standing privacy values, ensuring that openness and protection develop together. Consent and authorization management patterns support patient-directed sharing. Patients must be able to decide which apps can access their data, revoke permissions, and control onward sharing. In practice, this might involve consent dashboards where individuals can monitor and manage connected applications. For learners, consent management underscores the shift toward patient empowerment. Interoperability does not mean data is free for all. It means patients gain real authority over their own information. This model strengthens autonomy and ensures that individuals, not institutions, are at the center of data exchange. The Act also addresses fees and licensing frameworks. While developers and networks may charge reasonable fees to support interoperability, they cannot impose discriminatory or anti-competitive terms. For example, charging exorbitant connection fees to competitors would be deemed information blocking. For learners, this provision demonstrates the law's balance between economic sustainability and openness. Interoperability infrastructure requires investment, but that investment cannot be leveraged to stifle innovation or limit patient access. By establishing principles of fairness and non-discrimination, the Act encourages competition while preserving operational viability. The content and manner pathways provide structured flexibility for data exchange. If an actor cannot provide information in the exact format requested, they may offer it in an alternative content and manner that is technically feasible and reasonably accessible. This ensures that interoperability is not paralyzed by format disputes while still requiring good faith exchange. For learners, this illustrates how law mediates between ideals and practical realities. Absolute uniformity is rarely achievable, but structured alternatives allow progress while maintaining accountability. Recognizing that not all data sharing is risk-free, the Act includes a preventing harm exception. This allows providers to restrict access if disclosure would cause substantial harm to a patient or another person. For example, withholding psychiatric notes that could trigger self-harm may fall under this exception. For learners, the key insight is that interoperability is not absolute. Exceptions carve out necessary limits, ensuring that openness does not come at the expense of patient welfare. Each exception must be carefully documented, reinforcing that restrictions are permissible but not arbitrary. The privacy exception permits denials consistent with existing law and organizational policies. For instance, if state law prohibits sharing of substance use treatment records without additional consent, providers may restrict access under this exception. Similarly, documented policies limiting disclosure of certain sensitive categories may be invoked. For learners, the privacy exception illustrates the Act's alignment with the broader legal landscape. Interoperability cannot override other privacy laws. Instead, it must harmonize with them. This ensures consistency and prevents conflicts between frameworks. The security exception authorizes practices necessary to safeguard electronic health information. If a requested exchange poses unacceptable risks, an actor may impose safeguards such as additional authentication, encryption requirements, or temporary restrictions while risks are mitigated. For learners, this reflects the principle of proportionality in security. Data sharing cannot compromise protection, but security measures must be tailored and not used as pretext for blocking. Documentation is critical to show that restrictions are genuine responses to threats, not excuses to avoid interoperability. The infeasibility exception recognizes that in some cases, providing access may be beyond an actor's control or impose extreme burdens. Natural disasters, system outages, or legacy infrastructure limitations may justify temporary restrictions. For learners, this exception demonstrates realism in regulatory design. The Act acknowledges that compliance must be feasible, but it requires actors to document and justify their claims. This prevents abuse while offering necessary flexibility in extraordinary situations. Finally, transition considerations allow organizations to move toward interoperability gradually. Legacy systems may require staged upgrades, data mapping, or replacement before full compliance can be achieved. Regulators expect good faith efforts and documented plans, not perfection overnight. For learners, transition provisions highlight how systemic change is implemented in practice. Interoperability is a journey, and the Act balances urgency with practicality, ensuring that progress is steady and verifiable without being disruptive to patient care. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Enforcement of the information blocking provisions rests with the Office of Inspector General, which has authority to investigate violations and impose civil monetary penalties against certain actors. Developers of certified health IT and health information networks or exchanges may face significant financial liability for practices deemed unreasonable barriers to data access. For healthcare providers, enforcement takes the form of disincentives rather than direct penalties, such as impacts on reimbursement or participation in federal programs. For learners, this dual structure illustrates how accountability is calibrated to different actors. Vendors and networks face fines to deter anti-competitive behavior, while providers face programmatic consequences that reflect their central role in care delivery. Together, these tools create a comprehensive enforcement environment designed to break down barriers across the ecosystem. To facilitate nationwide interoperability, the Act introduced the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, often abbreviated as TEFCA. This governance model establishes baseline terms, conditions, and technical standards for participation in a national health information exchange environment. At its core are Qualified Health Information Networks, or QHINs, which agree to operate under the Common Agreement to enable secure, reliable exchange across organizational boundaries. For learners, TEFCA represents the practical implementation of interoperability policy. It provides the rules of the road for how networks will connect, govern trust, and resolve disputes. By creating a shared framework, TEFCA reduces fragmentation and ensures that exchange is consistent nationwide rather than piecemeal. Data segmentation for privacy is another critical component of interoperability under the Cures Act. Not all health information is subject to the same rules, and certain categories, such as mental health records or substance use treatment information, carry additional protections under federal or state law. Data segmentation techniques allow systems to tag and manage specially protected information, ensuring that it is shared only under appropriate circumstances. For learners, segmentation shows how technology adapts to legal nuance. Interoperability does not mean all data is always shared. It means that data flows in a way that respects layered privacy rules. This ability to differentiate and apply safeguards allows interoperability to coexist with sensitive protections. The emergence of third-party consumer health applications highlights another area of concern. Many apps chosen by patients to access their data fall outside HIPAA's protections once the data leaves a covered entity's control. This raises risks of secondary use, resale, or inadequate security. Regulators encourage notice and transparency practices so that patients understand what will happen to their information once it enters consumer apps. For learners, this development illustrates the limits of HIPAA's framework in a consumer-driven data environment. It emphasizes the need for patients to be educated and vigilant, while developers are expected to adopt responsible practices voluntarily or in response to market pressure. Notice and transparency practices extend to disclosures about how data will be used, whether it will be shared with third parties, and what rights consumers retain. Providers and developers must avoid misleading patients into believing HIPAA protections still apply once data is moved to apps outside covered entities. For learners, this highlights the role of clear communication in protecting privacy. Technical interoperability achieves little if patients do not understand the risks and rights associated with data flows. Transparent notice empowers individuals to make informed decisions about which apps to trust with their sensitive health information. Identity, authentication, and authorization controls are also central to secure patient access. Systems must ensure that only the rightful patient or their authorized delegate can access records through APIs. Multi-factor authentication, token-based authorization, and consent verification help reduce risks of impersonation or unauthorized use. For learners, these safeguards illustrate how security enables trust in interoperability. Open data exchange is only sustainable if participants are confident that identities are verified and permissions are respected. Without strong authentication, the promise of patient empowerment could collapse under the weight of fraud and misuse. Audit logging and provenance capture provide accountability for information exchange. Systems must record who accessed or shared data, what information was involved, and when the transaction occurred. Provenance ensures that data origin and modification history are preserved as information moves across systems. For learners, these features highlight how interoperability depends on traceability. In a network of interconnected exchanges, knowing the history of a record helps resolve disputes, maintain integrity, and detect unauthorized access. Auditability transforms transparency into operational reality, making oversight possible in complex digital ecosystems. Record reconciliation and provenance preservation further support data integrity. When multiple systems exchange information, mismatches or duplications can arise. Reconciliation processes ensure that records are accurate, consistent, and linked to the correct patient. Provenance tags show where data originated, enabling providers to evaluate reliability. For learners, reconciliation illustrates how interoperability is not just about access but also about quality. Sharing inaccurate or conflicting data undermines care, so technical and procedural safeguards must ensure that information is trustworthy as well as available. Breach and incident response coordination across API participants and exchanges is another key expectation. Because interoperability expands the surface area for risks, organizations must be able to detect, report, and respond to security incidents that affect shared data. Coordination ensures that one actor's breach does not go unreported and unnoticed by others who rely on the same systems. For learners, this area demonstrates how expanded connectivity requires shared responsibility for resilience. A fragmented response to incidents would erode trust and compromise the very goals of interoperability. The patient right of access under HIPAA aligns closely with the Cures Act's interoperability mandate. Together, they require that patients be provided access to their health information in the formats and timelines specified by regulation. By linking interoperability with existing access rights, regulators created synergy rather than redundancy. For learners, this alignment highlights the importance of legal coherence. Different laws and rules work together to reinforce the central value. Patients should have timely, electronic access to their own information, empowering them to participate fully in their care. Vendors and developers face specific obligations to maintain interoperability without imposing anti-competitive restrictions. This means they cannot design systems that intentionally lock in customers, block third-party apps, or create artificial barriers to switching. For learners, this focus illustrates how competition policy intersects with health data regulation. Interoperability is not only a technical goal but also a safeguard against monopolistic practices that could harm innovation and limit patient choice. Vendors must balance legitimate business interests with the broader mandate of open, fair, and secure data exchange. Program design implications for organizations are profound. Interoperability requires integration of privacy governance, security controls, and risk management processes into technical and operational planning. Policies must align with exceptions, ensure consistent documentation, and anticipate enforcement scrutiny. For learners, this synthesis shows how interoperability cannot be bolted on as an afterthought. It demands holistic program design, blending legal requirements, technical standards, and cultural change. Success depends on embedding interoperability into governance structures so that it becomes a sustainable, trusted feature of modern healthcare. In conclusion, the 21st Century Cures Act represents a paradigm shift toward open access, standardized APIs, and nationwide interoperability. Its framework prohibits information blocking while providing carefully defined exceptions for privacy, security, harm prevention, and infeasibility. By aligning with HIPAA access rights, integrating TEFCA, and emphasizing patient-directed data flows, the Act envisions a health system where information is both free to move and responsibly protected. For learners, the enduring lesson is that interoperability is not just a technical challenge but a governance imperative. It requires transparency, accountability, and secure design to transform health data from fragmented silos into a trusted resource that empowers patients and advances care. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.